My sister called me a failure at family dinner, telling everyone how I couldn't even find a decent job after the military while she climbed the corporate ladder at her prestigious consulting firm. But when her boss walked in and asked, "Rachel, are you still the CEO?" the entire table went silent. What they didn't know was that the multi-billion-dollar aerospace company her firm had been desperately trying to land as a client was owned by me. My name is Rachel Thompson, and for the past 3 years, my family has treated me like a cautionary tale about the limitations of military service. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The conversations at family gatherings always follow the same painful script: concerned whispers about my inability to translate my Army experience into civilian success. Growing up in Denver, our father William built a successful insurance brokerage from the ground up, while our mother Patricia worked as a senior accountant for a major firm downtown. The Thompson family valued education, professional achievement, and upward mobility. My younger sister Jessica delivered on all these expectations with remarkable consistency. She graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with an MBA, joined Meridian Strategic Consulting straight out of graduate school, and had risen to senior partner by age 28. Jessica was everything our parents had envisioned: polished, articulate, and financially successful. I chose a different path entirely. After high school, I enlisted in the Army and spent 7 years serving as a logistics officer, including 2 deployments to Afghanistan, where I managed complex supply operations for forward operating bases. I coordinated multi-million-dollar equipment transfers, supervised teams of soldiers under combat conditions, and earned commendations for my ability to maintain critical supply lines in hostile environments. The work was demanding, dangerous, and deeply meaningful. When I returned to civilian life in 2021, Jessica was already making headlines in Denver's business community. Meridian Strategic Consulting was one of the city's most prestigious firms, specializing in helping large corporations navigate complex mergers, acquisitions, and strategic partnerships. Jessica regularly appeared in business journals discussing market trends and corporate strategy. She drove a BMW, owned a downtown condo, and attended charity galas where she networked with Colorado's business elite. Meanwhile, I discovered that civilian employers had little understanding of military logistics experience. Job interviews became exercises in frustration, as I tried to explain how managing supply chains for combat operations related to corporate logistics roles. Hiring managers saw my military background as interesting but irrelevant, lacking the corporate experience they valued. My resume was filled with achievements that sounded impressive but didn't translate to the business metrics civilian employers wanted to see. I took whatever work I could find: warehouse supervisor for a Denver distribution company, operations coordinator for a small freight company, project manager roles that lasted just long enough to pay rent on my modest apartment in Aurora. Each position felt like a step backward from leading soldiers who depended on my decisions for their safety and mission success. Family dinners became increasingly uncomfortable showcases of Jessica's professional triumphs. She would update everyone on Meridian's latest client acquisitions, her promotion to the executive committee, and invitations to speak at industry conferences. When conversations turned to me, Patricia would diplomatically explain that I was still finding my niche in the civilian sector, or, quote, exploring different opportunities. The unspoken subtext was clear: the successful daughter versus the struggling veteran. Jessica occasionally offered assistance, suggesting entry-level positions at companies where Meridian had consulting relationships. Administrative roles, basic project coordination, positions that required none of the strategic planning, resource management, or leadership capabilities I'd developed commanding soldiers in combat zones. I declined these offers politely, understanding that accepting would confirm their narrative about my limitations. The family story crystallized over time. Jessica was the strategic thinker who'd leveraged her education into corporate success. I was the older sister who'd served honorably but couldn't adapt her military experience to civilian career advancement. They weren't intentionally cruel, just quietly disappointed that my service hadn't prepared me for the professional world they understood and valued. What none of them knew was that I hadn't abandoned my commitment to serving others. I'd simply found a different uniform to wear. The moment that changed everything happened at William's retirement celebration in September 2021. The family had gathered at Jessica's downtown condo for an elegant dinner party honoring our father's 40-year career in insurance. Jessica had orchestrated the entire evening with typical precision, catered food from Denver's best restaurant, wine pairings, and carefully curated guest list, including several of her Meridian colleagues. I almost declined the invitation. These professional gatherings made me feel like an outsider in my discount store dress, making small talk while everyone else discussed deals and markets I couldn't contribute to meaningfully. But Patricia insisted on family unity, and William had specifically requested my presence to celebrate his milestone. The evening progressed predictably. William gave a heartfelt speech about building something lasting, taking calculated risks, and the importance of professional relationships. The applause was warm and genuine. Jessica's colleagues congratulated him while seamlessly transitioning into conversations about their own client successes and strategic initiatives. I stood near the kitchen island, nursing a glass of wine and observing the easy confidence these people displayed when discussing multi-million-dollar corporate decisions. That's when I overheard the conversation that shattered my understanding of Jessica's world. Two Meridian partners were discussing a challenging client situation near the balcony doors, where I was admiring Jessica's city view. "The Avenger Aerospace account is becoming a nightmare," the first woman said, adjusting her pearl bracelet. "We've been pursuing this contract for 8 months, and they keep pushing back our proposals." Her male colleague sighed, loosening his expensive tie. "Jessica's been handling the relationship personally, but Avenger's executive team seems completely uninterested in our strategic consulting services. It's frustrating because this would be our largest aerospace client if we could just get them to engage seriously." "What's the issue exactly?" the woman asked. "Honestly, I think they're just not impressed with our credentials in the aerospace sector. They want consultants who understand their industry at a deeper level, people who've actually worked in aerospace operations, rather than general business strategy." My wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. Jessica had been telling the family for months about her, quote, challenging but promising aerospace client, making it sound like a successful relationship that was generating significant revenue for Meridian. The reality was apparently quite different. The conversation continued, but I was processing a larger realization. Jessica's confidence, her professional success stories, her effortless dominance of family conversations. How much of it was performance versus reality? If she was struggling with a major client opportunity and hadn't mentioned it to the family, what else might be different from the narrative she'd constructed? I slipped outside to Jessica's balcony, needing fresh air and space to think. The Denver skyline stretched before me, and I found myself considering all the assumptions I'd made about civilian success, corporate achievement, and my own perceived failures. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Thompson, this is David Chen from Avenger Aerospace. We received your information through a mutual contact. Would you be available for a conversation this week about potential consulting opportunities?" I stared at that message in confusion. I hadn't applied for any positions with aerospace companies, and I certainly hadn't given anyone permission to share my contact information. But something about the timing felt significant. Instead of deleting the message, I typed back, I'd be interested in learning more about the opportunity. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something was shifting, and I had the distinct feeling that my family's understanding of success was about to be completely redefined. The phone call with David Chen happened 3 days after William's retirement party. I sat in my small Aurora apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and job rejection letters, wondering why an aerospace executive would want to speak with an unemployed veteran. "Ms. Thompson," David's voice was crisp and professional when I answered. "Thank you for taking my call. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Avenger Aerospace, and I received your resume through some mutual military contacts, who suggested you might be interested in consulting opportunities." I frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, but I haven't submitted any applications to aerospace companies. There might be some mistake." "No mistake," David replied. "Your background managing complex logistics operations in combat environments caught our attention. We're looking for someone with real operational experience to help us streamline our supply chain processes. Most consultants understand theory but have never actually managed mission-critical logistics under pressure." The conversation lasted an hour. David explained that Avenger Aerospace was a mid-sized defense contractor specializing in unmanned aircraft systems and satellite technology. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They'd grown rapidly over the past 5 years, but were struggling with operational efficiency issues that traditional business consultants couldn't solve. They needed someone who understood both military requirements and practical implementation challenges. The position would be contract-based initially, David explained. 6 months to evaluate our current processes and recommend improvements. The compensation would be substantial, but more importantly, you'd be working on projects that directly support military operations overseas. Something about David's offer felt different from the corporate charity I'd been offered through Jessica's connections. This wasn't about creating a position for a struggling veteran. It was about solving real problems that required my specific expertise. I accepted the consulting contract that afternoon. Beerus. The first month was brutal. Avengers operations were more chaotic than anything I'd encountered in combat zones. Their supply chain management was inefficient. Communication between departments was fragmented, and their project timelines were consistently behind schedule. But these were exactly the kinds of problems I'd spent 7 years solving in the Army. I started by mapping their entire operational flow, identifying bottlenecks and redundancies that were costing them millions in delays and waste. My military experience with resource allocation, crisis management, and cross-functional coordination proved invaluable in ways I'd never experienced in civilian jobs. Within 6 weeks, I'd redesigned their procurement processes, established new communication protocols between engineering and manufacturing, and created contingency plans for supply chain disruptions. The results were immediate and dramatic. Project completion times improved by 30%, operational costs decreased by 15%, and client satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. David was impressed enough to offer me a permanent position as Director of Operations, with a salary that was double what I'd been earning in warehouse management. But more importantly, I was doing work that mattered, solving problems that affected real military missions and the safety of deployed soldiers. My family knew none of this. When they asked about my consulting work, I described it vaguely as helping a small company with logistics issues. Jessica would nod politely before changing the subject to her own client challenges, including her ongoing struggles with a difficult aerospace account that refused to engage with Meridian services. The irony was exquisite. While Jessica fought to win Avenger as a consulting client, I was quietly transforming their operations from the inside. While she presented herself as the family's business expert, I was solving problems she couldn't even understand. But this was only the beginning. David had bigger plans, and my success at Avenger was about to open doors I'd never imagined possible. While I was quietly revolutionizing operations at Avenger Aerospace, Jessica's career continued its public ascent through Denver's business community. By spring 2022, she'd been promoted to managing partner at Meridian Strategic Consulting, the youngest person in the firm's history to reach executive leadership. Local business journals featured her insights on corporate strategy, she was invited to speak at the Denver Business Summit, and she joined the board of directors for the Colorado Economic Development Association. Family gatherings became elaborate celebrations of Jessica's professional milestones. At Easter dinner, Patricia displayed newspaper clippings about Jessica's promotion, alongside photos from her recent appearance on a local business television program. William proudly shared details about Jessica's expanding client portfolio and her role in Meridian's most successful quarter ever. During these celebrations, I maintained my familiar position in the background, offering congratulations while deflecting questions about my own work. "Rachel's doing consulting now," Patricia would explain to curious relatives, helping companies with operational improvements. The description was technically accurate, but missed the scope and impact of what I was actually accomplishing. What my family couldn't see was the dramatic transformation happening in my professional life. My success at Avenger had generated attention throughout the aerospace industry. Other defense contractors began reaching out, seeking similar operational consulting services. David Chen had become not just my supervisor but my advocate, recommending me for increasingly complex and lucrative projects. The contracts were substantial. My 6-month engagement with Avenger had led to a permanent position with a salary that exceeded Jessica's impressive income. But more importantly, I was working on projects that directly supported military readiness and national security. Every efficiency improvement I implemented meant faster delivery of critical equipment to deployed forces, better resource allocation for training programs, and enhanced operational capabilities for defense missions. The irony was particularly sharp during Jessica's discussions about her challenging aerospace client. At Mother's Day brunch, she complained to the family about Avenger Aerospace's reluctance to engage with Meridian Strategic Consulting services. "They're incredibly difficult to work with," Jessica said, cutting her eggs Benedict with visible frustration. "Their executive team seems completely uninterested in our proposals, despite our proven track record with other major corporations. It's like they don't value professional consulting expertise." I nearly choked on my orange juice. From my position inside Avenger, I knew exactly why they weren't interested in Meridian's services. Their operational challenges required hands-on expertise with military logistics and defense contracting, not generic business strategy consulting. Jessica's team was offering solutions to problems they didn't understand, using frameworks that had no relevance to aerospace operations. "Maybe they need consultants with more specialized industry experience," I suggested carefully. Jessica dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand. "Business principles are universal, Rachel. Operations management is operations management, whether you're dealing with aerospace or any other industry. They're just being stubborn about accepting outside expertise." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I sat there marveling at the complete disconnect between Jessica's confident assumptions and the complex realities I navigated daily at Avenger. That afternoon, David texted me about a new opportunity. "Rachel, I've been speaking with some investors about a major acquisition. Your operational improvements at Avenger have been noticed by people much higher up the food chain. Are you available for a confidential conversation this week?" I agreed to the meeting, having no idea that David's investors would soon offer me something far beyond consulting contracts or executive positions. The family disappointment was about to become something none of them could have imagined possible. The meeting David had arranged took place in a private conference room at the Denver Tech Center, far from Avenger's usual offices. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just David, but 3 other people I didn't recognize. Margaret Walsh, a venture capital partner from Silicon Valley, General Robert Hayes, recently retired from the Air Force, and Dr. Susan Kim, whose business card identified her as Senior Vice President at Lockheed Martin. "Rachel," David said, standing as I entered, "thank you for joining us. These colleagues have been following your work at Avenger with considerable interest." Margaret spoke first, her voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions worth hundreds of millions. "Ms. Thompson, your operational improvements at Avenger haven't gone unnoticed in the defense investment community. David has shared some impressive metrics about efficiency gains and cost reductions under your leadership." General Hayes leaned forward, his bearing unmistakably military despite his civilian clothes. "More importantly, you've demonstrated something rare in this industry: the ability to translate military operational expertise into practical business solutions. Most consultants understand either the military side or the business side, but rarely both." Dr. Kim opened a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the conference table. "We're here to discuss a unique opportunity. There's a mid-sized aerospace company called Titan Defense Solutions that's facing serious operational challenges. They have excellent technology and strong government contracts, but their internal processes are inefficient and their leadership lacks operational experience." Margaret continued the explanation. "The company's current ownership is looking to sell. We're putting together an acquisition package, but we need someone with your specific background to lead the operational transformation, not as a consultant but as the chief executive officer." I stared at them, certain I'd misunderstood. "You're offering me a CEO position?" "We're offering you ownership," General Hayes clarified. "The acquisition structure would make you the majority shareholder and CEO of Titan Defense Solutions. You'd have full authority to restructure operations, implement your methodologies, and build the company according to your vision." Dr. Kim slid a financial summary across the table. The numbers were staggering. Titan Defense Solutions generated over $800 million in annual revenue, employed nearly 2,000 people, and held contracts with every major branch of the military. The acquisition price was substantial, but the investment group had already secured funding commitments. "Why me?" I asked, still processing the magnitude of what they were proposing. "Because," Margaret explained, "you've proven that military operational expertise can drive extraordinary business results. Titan needs someone who understands both the defense industry's requirements and the practical challenges of managing complex operations. Most importantly, you've demonstrated the ability to implement changes that produce measurable improvements quickly." The meeting lasted 3 hours. They walked me through Titan's current challenges, the acquisition timeline, and the operational authority I'd have as CEO. The opportunity was everything I'd never allowed myself to dream about. Leading a major defense company, implementing operational excellence on a massive scale, and directly supporting military readiness through improved efficiency and capability. I accepted their offer that afternoon, signing preliminary agreements that would remain confidential until the acquisition closed. The process would take 6 months of due diligence, regulatory approvals, and transition planning. During that time, I'd continue my work at Avenger while secretly preparing to become the CEO of one of America's largest privately held defense contractors. My family had no idea that their struggling veteran daughter was about to become one of the most powerful executives in the aerospace industry. The moment that made everything deeply personal happened at Jessica's promotion celebration in November 2022. Meridian Strategic Consulting had just named her their youngest ever senior managing partner, and she'd organized an elaborate dinner party at the Cherry Creek Country Club to mark the occasion. The guest list included Denver's business elite, several Meridian clients, and of course, our entire family. I'd planned to make a brief appearance and leave early, as had become my habit at these professional gatherings. But as I was preparing to slip away after the main course, I overheard a conversation that stopped me completely. Jessica was standing near the club's panoramic windows with 2 of her Meridian colleagues, discussing their ongoing challenges with difficult clients. The champagne had loosened their usual professional discretion, and their voices carried more clearly than they realized. "The Avenger Aerospace situation is becoming embarrassing," said James Morrison, Meridian's senior vice president. "We've been pursuing them for over a year, and they continue to dismiss our proposals without serious consideration." Jessica's response was sharp with frustration. "It's incredibly unprofessional. David Chen acts like our strategic consulting expertise is irrelevant to their business challenges. They claim they need operational specialists rather than business strategists, as if operations management is some mysterious field that requires military experience." The third colleague, Linda Chen, laughed dismissively. "These defense contractors are all the same. They're obsessed with hiring veterans as some kind of virtue signaling, even when those people lack real business training. It's like they think combat experience automatically translates to corporate competence." My blood went cold as I listened from behind a decorative pillar. "Exactly," Jessica continued, her voice gaining momentum. "My sister Rachel is a perfect example of this problem. She spent years in the Army and now struggles to find meaningful civilian employment, because military experience doesn't actually prepare you for complex business challenges. But these aerospace companies keep prioritizing veterans over qualified business professionals." James nodded knowingly. "It's frustrating when we're trying to help companies improve their operations, but they're more interested in checking diversity boxes than implementing real strategic solutions. The worst part," Jessica added, "is that Rachel has been doing some minor consulting work with small companies, and now she thinks she understands business operations. She actually suggested that Avenger might need, quote, specialized industry experience, rather than our proven strategic frameworks. It's exactly the kind of naive thinking that keeps veterans trapped in operational roles instead of advancing to leadership positions." Linda raised her champagne glass mockingly. "To the challenges of educating clients about the value of real business expertise over military credentials." They clinked glasses, laughing at what they saw as the fundamental incompetence of veterans in business settings. I stood frozen behind that pillar, listening to my sister use my career struggles as evidence for why companies like Avenger were wrong to value military experience over traditional business consulting. But the betrayal went deeper than personal humiliation. Jessica wasn't just dismissing my capabilities. She was actively undermining the entire premise that military experience could contribute to business success. She was coaching her colleagues to view veteran hiring as misguided virtue signaling rather than strategic talent acquisition. What made the moment even more painful was the casual confidence with which she dismissed operational expertise. Jessica had no idea that the minor consulting work she was mocking had already generated millions of dollars in efficiency improvements at Avenger. She had no understanding that my naive thinking about specialized industry experience was exactly why Avenger had rejected Meridian's generic business solutions. Most importantly, Jessica had no idea that in 3 weeks, I would officially become the CEO of Titan Defense Solutions, making me one of the most powerful executives in the industry she was trying to penetrate. I walked away from that conversation with crystal clarity about what needed to happen next. My family's dismissive assumptions about military competence weren't just personal slights. They represented broader misconceptions that needed to be corrected dramatically and publicly. The official announcement of my appointment as CEO of Titan Defense Solutions was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in January 2023. But the family dinner that would change everything happened 3 days earlier, on a snowy Saturday evening at Patricia and William's house in Cherry Hills Village. The dinner was supposed to be a casual family gathering, but Jessica had invited her new assistant, Marcus Webb, who was also Meridian's newest junior partner. Marcus was ambitious, well-connected, and eager to impress Jessica by demonstrating his industry knowledge and networking capabilities. I arrived at my parents' house directly from a weekend strategy session at Titan's headquarters, where I'd been finalizing operational restructuring plans with my new executive team. I was exhausted but maintaining the same low profile I'd cultivated for months, letting my family assume I was still struggling with small consulting projects. The evening began predictably. Jessica dominated conversation with updates about Meridian's expansion into new markets, her recent speaking engagement at a national consulting conference, and her growing influence in Denver's business community. Marcus contributed enthusiastically, sharing insights about emerging trends in strategic consulting and his efforts to develop new client relationships. Speaking of challenging clients, Jessica said as Patricia served dessert, Marcus has been helping me with that impossible aerospace account I've mentioned. Avenger Aerospace continues to resist our consulting services, despite our clear expertise in operational improvement. Marcus nodded eagerly. It's fascinating how some industries resist external strategic guidance. These defense contractors seem to think their operational challenges are too specialized for traditional business consulting approaches. I continued eating my apple pie, saying nothing while listening to them discuss the limitations of military-focused thinking in business contexts. The real problem, Jessica continued, glancing at me with what I recognized as performative sympathy, is that companies like Avenger prioritize hiring veterans over qualified business professionals. They think combat experience translates to corporate competence, which creates operational inefficiencies. Marcus seized the opportunity to demonstrate his analytical skills. That's exactly the kind of strategic blindness we help clients overcome. Military experience might be valuable for operational roles, but real business transformation requires sophisticated strategic frameworks that most veterans simply don't possess. William and Patricia nodded politely, accustomed to these professional discussions that excluded me from meaningful participation. That's when the doorbell rang. Patricia looked confused. I'm not expecting anyone else tonight. I felt my stomach drop as I realized what was about to happen. Through the front window, I could see a black sedan in the driveway and 2 figures approaching the door. I'll get it, I said quickly, but William was already walking toward the entryway. He opened the door to reveal Margaret Walsh and General Hayes, both dressed in expensive business attire despite the Saturday evening timing. Margaret carried a leather portfolio, and General Hayes wore the unmistakable bearing of senior military leadership. Good evening, Margaret said politely. We're looking for Rachel Thompson. We have some documents that require her immediate signature. William looked back toward the dining room, clearly confused by the unexpected visit from such obviously important people. Rachel? He called. There are some business associates here to see you. I walked to the front door, aware that my entire family was watching with growing curiosity. Jessica and Marcus had stopped their conversation and were staring at the unexpected visitors. Margaret, General Hayes, I said calmly. I wasn't expecting you tonight. General Hayes smiled. Apologies for the intrusion, but the final documentation came through today. We wanted to deliver it personally before Monday's announcement. Margaret opened her portfolio and handed me a thick folder. Congratulations, CEO Thompson. Titan Defense Solutions is officially yours. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway as my family processed what they'd just witnessed. Jessica was the first to find her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Rachel, are you still the CEO?" I turned toward the dining room, where my family sat frozen in various stages of shock and confusion. "Actually," I replied, "I just became one." The silence that followed my revelation lasted exactly 12 seconds. I counted them while watching my family's faces cycle through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Then the questions erupted in overlapping waves of shock and desperate attempts to understand what they'd just witnessed. "Rachel, what do you mean you became a CEO?" Patricia asked, her voice tight with confusion. "CEO of what company?" Margaret Walsh stepped forward with professional composure. "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter has just acquired majority ownership of Titan Defense Solutions, one of the largest privately held aerospace companies in America. She'll be leading nearly 2,000 employees and managing over $800 million in annual revenue." William dropped into his recliner, staring at me like I'd transformed into someone completely unrecognizable. "800 million? Rachel, how is this possible? You've been doing small consulting projects." "No, Dad," I said calmly, noting how Jessica had gone completely pale. "I've been building toward this for 18 months. The small consulting work was actually comprehensive operational restructuring for major defense contractors." Marcus Webb, who minutes earlier had been lecturing about veterans' limitations in business contexts, looked like he wanted to disappear into the furniture. His ambitious networking evening had just become a masterclass in professional humiliation. Jessica finally found her voice, though it emerged as a strangled whisper. But you couldn't even find a decent job. You were struggling with basic employment applications." General Hayes smiled with the patient expression of someone accustomed to explaining military concepts to civilians. "Miss Thompson, your sister wasn't struggling with employment. She was being selective about opportunities that matched her expertise level. Most civilian positions would have been significant steps backward from commanding logistical operations in combat environments." "I don't understand," Patricia said, her nursing background making her focus on practical details. "If Rachel was capable of this level of success, why didn't she tell us? Why let us think she was having career difficulties?" I looked around the dining room where I'd endured years of sympathetic explanations about my limitations and gentle suggestions about accepting realistic employment options. "Because," I said, "I needed to prove something to myself before I could prove it to anyone else. And because the assumptions you made about military experience limiting civilian success needed to be challenged, not just contradicted." Marcus made a tactical error by attempting to salvage the situation professionally. "This is incredible news, Rachel. Meridian would be very interested in discussing strategic consulting opportunities with Titan Defense Solutions." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Marcus," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd developed commanding soldiers. "Titan Defense Solutions is the parent company of Avenger Aerospace. You know, the impossible client that Jessica has been pursuing for over a year." Jessica's face went from pale to completely white. "You own Avenger?" "I've been the director of operations at Avenger for the past year," I explained. "Every proposal Meridian submitted was reviewed by me personally. We rejected your consulting services because your strategic frameworks don't address the operational realities of defense contracting." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Jessica sat frozen, probably calculating how many times she'd criticized Avenger's decision-making in front of the person who was actually making those decisions. William recovered enough to ask the question everyone was thinking. "Rachel, why didn't you just tell us what you were accomplishing?" I considered my answer carefully. "Because you needed to understand that your assumptions about military experience were wrong. Not just about me, but about the thousands of veterans who get dismissed as operationally capable, but strategically limited." Patricia wiped her eyes, her nurse's training helping her process the emotional complexity of the situation. "We're proud of you, Mija. We've always been proud of your service. We just didn't understand how to translate that pride into civilian terms." Margaret and General Hayes completed the necessary paperwork transfer and left, but not before General Hayes shook my hand and said, "Ma'am, It's been an honor working with an officer who understands that leadership doesn't require recognition to be effective." After they left, my family sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the struggling veteran they thought they knew with the aerospace executive who just acquired a billion-dollar company. 6 weeks after the revelation at family dinner, Jessica called me for the first time since that shocking Saturday evening. Her voice carried none of the confident authority I'd grown accustomed to hearing. Instead, she sounded uncertain, almost fragile. "Rachel, could we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I need to understand some things." We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in downtown Denver, neutral territory where neither of us had professional or family associations. When I arrived, Jessica was already there, sitting in a corner booth and staring into an untouched latte. She looked smaller somehow, as if the revelation had physically diminished her presence. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you'd want to speak with me after everything I said." I ordered coffee and waited, letting her find the words she needed. "I've been thinking about that night constantly," Jessica continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "About all the assumptions I made, all the things I said about military experience and operational capabilities. About you." She paused, struggling with emotions I'd rarely seen her display. "Rachel, I spent 2 years trying to win Avenger as a client, building proposals and strategy presentations, convinced that they were making poor decisions by rejecting our expertise. The entire time, you were the person making those decisions." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. While Jessica had been developing sophisticated presentations about strategic consulting value, I'd been implementing operational improvements that generated measurable results. "I researched Titan Defense Solutions after that dinner," Jessica said. "The financial reports, the client testimonials, the operational metrics. Rachel, what you've accomplished isn't just successful, it's extraordinary. You've transformed multiple companies using approaches that I never understood or respected." Over the following months, something fundamental shifted in our family dynamics. The weekly dinners that had once showcased Jessica's achievements became genuine conversations about our respective work challenges and successes. Patricia began asking detailed questions about my operational strategies, genuinely curious about military logistics applications in business contexts. William surprised me most of all. He started reading defense industry publications and asking informed questions about aerospace markets and government contracting processes. "I want to understand what my daughter actually does," he told me during one of our private conversations. The transformation extended beyond personal relationships. Word about my success had spread throughout Denver's business community, generating invitations to speak at industry conferences and serve on corporate boards. I was asked to join the Colorado Defense Industry Council and became a keynote speaker at veterans' employment symposiums. More meaningfully, I began receiving calls from other veterans who were struggling with civilian career transitions. My story had become proof that military experience could translate into extraordinary business success, but only when applied in contexts that valued operational expertise over traditional corporate credentials. Jessica's own career evolved in unexpected directions. The humbling experience of discovering her assumptions were wrong led her to specialize in helping companies integrate veteran talent more effectively. She developed new consulting frameworks that recognized the strategic value of military experience rather than treating it as a limitation to overcome. "I spent years thinking that business success required leaving military thinking behind," she told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "Now I understand that the most successful companies are the ones that leverage military operational excellence rather than dismissing it." 6 months after the revelation, Jessica approached me with a proposal that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "Rachel, Meridian wants to partner with Titan Defense Solutions on a veteran integration consulting program, not as your strategic advisors, but as students learning from your operational methodologies." For the first time in our adult lives, Jessica was asking for my expertise, rather than offering her assistance. The struggling veteran sister had become the industry leader whose methods other companies wanted to emulate. Today, I sit in the executive suite of Titan Defense Solutions' Denver headquarters, overlooking the Rocky Mountains and leading one of America's most successful aerospace companies. The framed photo on my desk shows our latest achievement, the successful launch of 3 military satellites that will enhance communication capabilities for deployed forces worldwide. The company has grown beyond my initial projections. Under my leadership, Titan Defense Solutions has expanded to over 3,000 employees, increased annual revenue to $1.2 billion, and earned recognition as the Defense Department's Contractor of the Year. More importantly, we've become the industry leader in veteran integration, with former military personnel comprising 40% of our workforce in meaningful senior-level positions. The veteran hiring program I developed at Titan has become the gold standard for the aerospace industry. We don't offer charity positions or token roles. We identify where military expertise creates genuine competitive advantages and build career paths that leverage those capabilities. Every quarter, I receive reports about operational improvements, cost savings, and innovation breakthroughs that directly result from applying military thinking to complex business challenges. Jessica's transformation has been equally remarkable. Her partnership with Titan led to the creation of Meridian's Military Talent Integration Division, which now helps Fortune 500 companies develop authentic veteran hiring strategies. She's become one of the nation's leading experts on translating military capabilities into business value, speaking at conferences, and advising executives who want to move beyond superficial diversity initiatives. I used to think success meant proving military experience was irrelevant to business excellence, she told me recently. Now I understand that real success comes from proving military experience is essential to business excellence. Our family dinners have become strategic planning sessions where Jessica and I discuss industry trends, policy implications, and opportunities to advance veteran employment initiatives. Patricia and William contribute insights from their own professional networks, actively promoting veteran-owned businesses and military-friendly hiring practices. The broader impact extends far beyond our family or even our industry. The operational methodologies I developed at Titan have influenced defense acquisition policies, improved military readiness through better contractor performance, and demonstrated that veteran-led companies consistently outperform traditional corporations in government contracting. Last month, I testified before Congress about veteran employment barriers and recommended policy changes that would help other military professionals transition more effectively to civilian leadership roles. The testimony wasn't about my personal success story. It was about systemic changes needed to harness the full potential of veteran talent in American business. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy is the mentorship network I've built with other veteran entrepreneurs. Every month, I meet with former military officers who are launching their own companies, navigating complex business challenges, or struggling with civilian career transitions. Each conversation reminds me that success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about creating pathways for others to follow. The letters I receive weekly from veterans who've found meaningful employment through companies that now understand military value confirm that our work is having real impact. A former Marine logistics officer who became CEO of a transportation company. An Army intelligence specialist who founded a cybersecurity firm. A Navy supply officer who transformed manufacturing operations for a major automotive contractor. My story isn't really about family vindication or personal triumph over adversity. It's about understanding that military service provides extraordinary preparation for business leadership, but only when applied in environments that recognize and leverage that preparation effectively. The sister who called me a failure at family dinner now introduces me to her clients as the CEO who revolutionized how America's defense industry values military expertise. The transformation isn't just mine, it's hers, our families, and increasingly our entire business communities. Sometimes the most powerful way to change assumptions isn't through arguments or explanations, but through results that speak louder than any words ever could. The veteran they thought was struggling had actually been building the future they couldn't see coming. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.